Ah, Prime Day. The day where we all open up Amazon and binge on a bunch of stuff that we don't really need if we're being honest with ourselves. But what if I told you that you could binge on some stuff that was completely free on Prime Gaming? Hello everybody and welcome back to Cat and Kitty Gaming. My name is Matt. Kelsey and I are a married gaming duo who normally do things together, but if Kelsey is not available or is working on another project sometimes, I will do a little thing by myself which we call Cat Solo. And in today's video, we are looking at the games available in Amazon Prime Gaming for Prime Day. Now, typically we will go through and cover the games available every month, but in this particular month, there's so much available that it wouldn't really be practical to go through and cover each one in detail. So today I'm going to be giving you an overview and then spending a little bit more time on the ones that I think are most worth your time, especially on one particularly big release, which I think you're going to be really excited about. So the available games we're going to be covering are Revita, Autonauts, Steam World Dig 2, Rogue Book, Shovel Knight Showdown, Once Upon a Jester, Cook Serve Delicious 3, and finally, which I am most excited about, Star Wars The Force Unleashed. So you may be wondering, why Prime Gaming at all? Why should I care about this? Well, if you have a Prime membership, which a lot of us do, you get Prime Gaming completely for free as part of the deal. I think Prime Gaming does a pretty good job of highlighting games that are good, but not necessarily the most popular. So you'll get a chance to see some indie titles, some things you might not have otherwise experienced. Prime Gaming also has a variety of in-game content, and that can be things like loot boxes or cosmetics. There's a variety of different stuff in there, and you'll want to go check it out for yourself because the in-game content type stuff tends to go in and out pretty quickly, so you have to be paying attention. But I've seen stuff in there for PUBG, I've seen stuff for League of Legends, so a wide variety of things available if you're into that sort of thing. Okay, so let's break it down, shall we? The very first game we're going to cover is Revita. And Revita is a roguelike pixel art game, which is very, very beautiful and very fun. I found myself really engaged with this title. If you're not familiar with the term roguelike, it basically means that you are at some level resetting every time you make an attempt at playing this game. Now, the original game Rogue, which started this whole trend, was very harsh. You had to start from scratch every time you'd play. And a lot of these games now are sometimes called more like roguelites, with a T. Basically what that means is you are sort of soft resetting. You get to keep some of your power, but you're still starting sort of from the ground up every time you make an attempt at this game. The things I loved about Revita is it is very beautiful. It does give a warning at the beginning of like a content warning that it handles some mature themes, so just bear that in mind if you are someone who maybe struggles with your mental health. Just keep that in mind. It has very smooth and very responsive controls, which I thought was really impressive for what appears to be just an indie release. That is something that these small studios often struggle with, and Revita certainly did not. This game has a very interesting mechanic where you're kind of using your health as a currency. So there's ways to recover your health, but when you are going up through the tower, you can exchange your health for power-ups, like more speed, more attack, that sort of thing. But if you take too many hits on your way up there, it means you naturally don't have as much health to exchange. So it's kind of this interesting catch-22 of, do I want more health to fight the boss at the end, or do I want to trade that health to get some extra power-ups? And I thought it was a really interesting mechanic that forced you to think strategically about how you wanted to approach the rest of the tower. So I think Revita is definitely worth a look. I had a lot of fun with it just in my little playtest. Next up is Autonauts, which is one of my favorite titles of this group of games. Autonauts is interesting because in the store it says adventure, and I feel like that is a pretty serious mislabeling of how this game actually plays out. There are some elements of that. There are some ways it reminds me of like maybe Minecraft with all like the resource gathering and stuff that you need to do, but I think it's more of like a factory style game because it's all about automating resources, building up a little village, and just trying to expand and increase all the production you have going on. One of the things that I really love about this game is that it really embraced just the low budget nature with the graphics and everything. The graphics are very simple, but they're very fun, they're very cute. It's got this nice little tilt shift effect going on. The animations are all very simple, but they're very nice and they're appropriate for the genre, and I think that's perfect. It's nice when a game will lean into its limitations rather than trying to pretend like they don't exist. For me, one of the coolest things about this game is the programmable robots. Normally when you're playing a game like this, you can give some very simple instructions like collect this resource. But with bots, you're able to do something like pick up this item, go harvest this resource, put the resource in the box, put down the item, harvest a different resource. Now, obviously, they can only store so many commands at a time, so you have to be strategic and think carefully about how you want to program these robots. But if you're into computer programming at all, this really could be an interesting game for you to try out, because it has a lot of those elements while making it simple enough that you're not actually doing code. I, for one, am terrible at coding, so this was kind of refreshing that I got to feel like I was doing it without having to actually be able to code. So I think that Autonauts is a very charming, fun game with some factory and base building elements that is going to appeal to probably a pretty wide variety of people. I definitely recommend this one. I think it is worth checking out. Next up, we have Roguebook, and if it wasn't obvious from the title, Roguebook is another roguelike game. This one, like other roguelike games, is not out to hold your hand. It's out to give you a challenge. So if you are not into games that really want to make you think, really want to push you in terms of your strategic thinking abilities, then this one might not be so much for you. But there are a lot of things about it that I liked. This game is probably best described as some sort of RPG or card battler because there are deck building elements, and you can use those cards to direct your characters to make specific moves. And the way that the formations in this game work is the front character is always going to be the one taking the damage, and there's a mechanic called block where that character will reduce the damage they receive by whatever your block amount is. So you want to have a big beefy character in front as much as you can, you want to give them a high block value, and that's kind of the way the strategy of this game works. Well, you're not always going to draw the cards that you want, and that's really where the challenge comes in, is trying to figure out how to keep your tank up front soaking the damage and keeping your damage dealer in back safely dealing damage. I wouldn't say that I dislike the gameplay, it's just not necessarily my cup of tea. One small criticism I do have of this game is if you watch the opening sequence, it's absolutely beautiful. Those graphics in that intro sequence are just gorgeous and I love them, but then the rest of the game is maybe not quite as impressive graphically speaking. It looks a little bit almost like a mobile game, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I just would like to see a little bit more from a PC title. And again, I don't want to criticize indie developers too much, but it's just not my personal cup of tea, so take it for what it's worth. So if you're up for a challenge, you like roguelikes or card games, that sort of thing, this game might be for you. Not so much for me, but hey, if it's your thing, go for it. Next up, we have Shovel Knight Showdown, which is a pixel art platforming game, and from people who like platforming games, it seems that Shovel Knight is a very well-respected title. And looking at this game on Steam, it looks like there's several titles under this franchise name, and I had a little bit of a hard time figuring out how they all fit together. It would appear that Shovel Knight Showdown is sort of an add-on to Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and that this was just released on Prime Gaming under the umbrella term of Shovel Knight Showdown. So hopefully that's clear enough for you. Basically, it's just what you'd expect from a platformer game. You've got an adventure mode, but in this one, you've got the battle mode added. I did try out the battle mode a little bit, and it's interesting because it uses all keyboard. It doesn't use mouse, and I don't know if you can use a controller with it or not. I didn't really experiment with it too much. But for me, it felt a little bit clunky using the keyboard, so just bear that in mind if you're looking into this title. This strikes me as a title that is intended for people who are already fans of the Shovel Knight franchise. If you're looking to get into the series, maybe consider playing the first original game before you play this one. If you're really into Shovel Knight, I'm guessing you'll probably like this one. Otherwise, maybe back up a little bit and see if you'd be into the other titles before you try diving into this one, because this game does seem to me like it has a little bit of a learning curve. Next, we're at Once Upon a Jester, which is one of the most unique and odd games I have ever played. This game, I guess, is sort of an adventure game. It doesn't really fit into typical genre descriptions. This game has a very unique and very interesting art style, which almost reminds me of like YouTube videos. They almost look a little bit like Flash animations. They're very interesting. One thing that really stuck out to me about this game is that the voice acting is kind of janky, almost like ridiculous at times, and it seems like intentionally so. It makes me wonder if the developers just did the voice acting themselves or if they just kind of hired whoever they could find for cheap. And it's not like it's bad, it's just kind of janky. Like, it clearly wasn't really done in a studio, it was just sort of done sitting at a desk. At one point in particular, one of the characters is like screaming and you can hear the echo and the microphone is peaking and the whole thing is just kind of over the top and silly and hilarious. At the end of the day, this game is about you and your friend trying to put on a performance for the townsfolk so that you can earn your way into this bigger, better performance in the castle. That's really the core gameplay loop of this game. And I did have fun with it. It's definitely not for everybody. If you're the kind of person who's ever done live theater, you'll probably get a kick out of this game. Otherwise, this is probably not a title for everybody just because it's so niche and so out there. But hey, I had fun with it. Our next title is Cook, Serve, Delicious 3. And this game is another one that is probably pretty niche, probably not going to be for everybody. I found this one honestly to be kind of stressful. I don't know if you've ever played one of those mobile games where you have to like make the food, and you have to, manage these various different stations and make sure the customers get what they want. This is kind of like that, except you're doing it on the keyboard rather than, say, on your phone. And obviously some people really like these games. My wife, Kelsey, in particular, enjoys them. I not so much. I also thought the graphics were just kind of mediocre. They weren't bad, but they weren't anything to write home about either. So this game, I think it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple to say, not going to be for everybody, not for me, but hey, some people like this kind of thing, especially if you're into cooking games. So yeah, not for me, not for a lot of people, but maybe for some. Alright, so finally we have arrived at The Force Unleashed, which is the game I'm probably most excited about out of all of these titles, and the one you might have been seeing advertisements for when Prime Day comes up. This is a title that is very well liked by Star Wars fans, but it's also fairly old at this point. I remember when I saw this title was going to be available, I got really excited and thought, oh yeah, that game was released a little while ago, but it's still fairly recent. No, it was released in 2008, which is a while ago, and that makes me feel kind of old. But it's a very well liked, well respected game, and there's a lot of stuff to be excited about with this title. So The Force Unleashed is sort of a hack and slash action adventure style of game, and it is really the story of you being the apprentice of Darth Vader, which is a pretty cool perspective and not one that is really often told in the Star Wars universe, sort of playing on the dark side, being more of an evil character. You are sort of this young boy who's been taken under the wing of Darth Vader, who trains you up to be sort of this Jedi hunter. So that already has me interested in terms of story. I think it's a really cool concept. In the opening sequence of the game, you get to play as Darth Vader, who is just kicking the ever-living crap out of some Wookiees, and let me tell you, it feels so flipping satisfying to do. This game really knows what it means to make the user feel powerful and just to have, the abilities of Darth Vader and to be able to just kick the living snot out of people. It's really fun. Now, it being a Star Wars title, naturally the music is going to be great, the sound effects, everything is going to be great. You never have a complaint there. Of course, they're going to be recycling the music of John Williams, who is an absolute legend of a composer, and my gosh, it just brings me back to my childhood, watching Star Wars, listening to the music. As you can tell, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to Star Wars. So yes, my inner kid was squealing with delight at this game. And on top of all that, it's a free Star Wars game. So no matter what you think about the quality of all the things I just listed, it's free. It's worth giving it a try, right? Now, that's not to say that the game is perfect. Of course it's not. There are issues, particularly in the context of a modern video game player. If you didn't grow up with games like this, it might be a little hard for you to get used to it and kind of forgive some of its flaws. So let's just take a second to talk about what some of those things are. First of all, let's just address the obvious. Yes, the graphics are pretty dated. The game is almost 15 years old now, something like that, so the graphics are going to look pretty dated. They don't look horrible, but they look like you'd expect for a game from that era. So naturally, they're not going to look amazing. They're not going to look brand new. Now, this is not helped by the fact that the game has a really, really terrible options menu. There's a couple of gameplay things in there. There's like one or two graphical type options, but there's really nothing that you can customize. You can't change anything really other than the resolution. You can't say, turn bloom or ambient occlusion off. You can't turn anti-aliasing on or off. There's no customization available. Now, this game is so old that you could probably run it on a potato. If you have a computer, it will run this game. I can almost guarantee you it will run this game. This game does also appear to be locked at 30 frames per second, which is kind of a bummer. Now, I know that was really more of the standard back in that day, but there were still plenty of games that were in 60 frames per second, and it would be nice if this one could be. I don't know if there's some kind of backdoor way to make that happen, but I didn't look into it. I just didn't have time because I'm trying to cover so many games and get this out for Prime Day, but it might be worth a look. Also, I did notice that the controls felt a little bit clunky, and some of that may have to do with the fact that I don't know what I'm doing yet with this game. I might get better and revise my opinion by the end of it, but at the outset, it did feel a little bit clunky, a little bit difficult to use. I will warn people that Don't play this game unless you have some kind of controller or something. With the keyboard, this game just feels so clunky and awful. Part of that has to do with the fact that this game really wants to encourage you to use your force power. So like throw objects at people, you know, to defeat your enemies through a variety of techniques. And obviously like throwing an object at someone requires a lot of precision, which is just not available through the keyboard. So bear that in mind. I also noticed that there didn't seem to be any kind of like dash forward mechanic, so closing in on enemies got to be a little bit tricky. You also have to stand still when you're blocking. So I didn't particularly love that part of the gameplay, but once again, I'm very early on. Maybe I'll unlock those sorts of abilities later on as I go. One other thing I will mention, and this could be due to the fact that it was a PC port, was that I definitely noticed some weirdness going on with the game. There were definitely some glitches that are worth pointing out. Just for example, there were a few instances where TIE fighters just sort of decided to like drop out of the sky and just give up on life. Like I'm in the middle of this duel with this, you know, outcast Jedi, and there's a TIE fighter just chilling on the platform with me. And I don't know what the frick is going on here, but it was funny, it was amusing, I'll give it that, but it was also pretty distracting and kind of took me out of it, which sort of ruined the immersion of, you know, playing as Darth Vader and that kind of thing. So again, it's an old game, I'm going to give it some grace, but these little things do get distracting. So overall thoughts on the game, I think it is well worth your time. I had a lot of fun in my short time that I was able to play it while I was making this video, and just from hearing reactions from other people, I have a number of friends who played this game, and they all spoke very highly of it, really enjoyed their time with it. Now, if you look on, say, Steam or on Metacritic or places like that, the reviews are going to be kind of middling, kind of average, but I have yet to meet anyone who really actively dislikes this game. So take that for whatever it's worth. I liked it, my friends like it, I've heard a lot of people do. I think it's certainly worth your time. Well, hey, that is going to do it for this video and our coverage of everything available in Prime Gaming, particularly for Prime Day. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this, would you please force choke the like and subscribe buttons? Make sure they submit to your will. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.